Operationalizing your security is a big challenge. Most companies don't have a good perspective on where their biggest threats lie and what should be their focus. This means that money and effort doesn't always provide the biggest bang for the buck. Today, we're going to be talking with a company that helps you understand your threat profile so you can build the right defenses. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is Chris Brandt here without Sandesh Patel today. Welcome to another future video podcast. Before we get started, I just want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out, and 95% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribers. Today, we are talking with Matt Rose, who is Chief Architect at Bionic, an application security posture management platform that can help you identify your biggest threats. Matt also runs the Tattoos, Code, and Data Flows podcast for Bionic, so we should have a pro with us today. Matt is going to tell us what these products are all about and how they can help transform your security posture. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. Really appreciate it.
I'm excited to talk to you. I think this is a really important area. We spend a lot of time talking about people buy a lot of gear, but they don't always get a lot of use out of the gear, and they keep having breaches because they're not focusing on the real priorities in their organization, the real security threats. And so I think what you guys are doing is really interesting. I'm excited to talk about it. But before we get into that, could I just get a little recap about Bionic and sort of the founder story, and what was the idea behind creating Bionic?
The problem statement is that applications are being delivered faster and faster. Their CI/CD pipelines, you're releasing 10 times a day, 100 times a day, depending on the organization. And really that unknown risk, the application being a entity that you don't know the whole architecture, and you have the concept of architecture drift. So the founders, Adon Nino and Eyal Momo, basically created a platform that allowed you to see the lens. They both came out of the 8200, the cybersecurity division of the military in Israel, and they were experts on malware research and reverse engineering, and came up with a new concept to help all organizations truly understand what their applications in production look like and what changes to those applications introduce new risk.
There's certainly a lot of impressive security technology companies that have come out of Israel in the past from that.
Absolutely.
From those very groups. So let's talk a little bit about ASPM. This has become kind of a new market buzzword. And I don't know that a lot of people are entirely clear on what constitutes ASPM. And then there's, ASPM versus CSPM versus CASB and all that. And can you just talk about where everything kind of fits in the market?
Absolutely. So application security posture management, we didn't even call ourselves that when we first came to market, came out of stealth a year and a half ago. We were trying to figure out what we were. People are like, are you a SaaS vendor, or are you a IaaS vendor? All the acronyms soup about security technologies. But really what application security posture management is to understand the posture of your application as it associates with security in a production environment. So it's looking at the whole ecosystem. And you mentioned cloud security posture management, or CSPM. The best way I get people to understand it is cloud security posture management is a scan of the cloud infrastructure. All the services that you see in a CSPM product are cloud services, the interactions between those cloud service misconfigurations, but it's all about the cloud and the infrastructure. The app lives in that application or that cloud infrastructure, and it can the CSPM solution can kind of see what's going on in the app. But what ASPM does is actually provide you with all the data, very similar to CSPM, but at the app service level, websites or web applications, databases, message broker, third parties, all the data flows, all the upstream and downstream API calls. So it's providing you a complete and holistic view of the application architecture in a very fluid CI/CD process. It integrates in and provides you with that complete infrastructure of the application. So it's a new concept, and a lot of the acronym soup, as I like to say, associated with AST scanning solutions. You have SaaS, which looks at the source code, SCA, or software composition analysis, that looks at the open source package, API security. They're all looking at a slice of that application. What ASPM, it provides you is a complete posture of the application, inclusive of all the components, the source code, the open source packages, the APIs, the third-party frameworks, whatever it is.
You're kind of going to the source and really analyzing everything from that point.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all driven directly from the compiled artifacts of the application. So you release, an application, a Java app, a WAR file, EAR file, a .NET app, which is a DLL, where the source of truth for ASPM for Bionic is really those artifacts. We reverse engineer those artifacts to provide you with that holistic view of the architecture, so it's code accurate. The platform's agentless. We don't need to see functional test activities or user activities or packet sniffing. So it is code accurate based on what is being deployed to your production environment.
That sounds, one, really tricky, and two, extraordinarily helpful. How does that work? Like if you're not an agent, what kind of goes into that?
It's very simplistic. So we just integrate into the CI/CD process, more of the CD process of how you're releasing software, and basically do a collection of those application artifacts that I previously mentioned. WAR files, jar files, EAR files, configuration files, the associated environment variables, and do that reverse engineering. And it can be run every time you do a new code push. So it does a collection, it uses static analysis techniques to reverse engineer the artifacts and provide you with that holistic view of the application, not only in a graphical representation, we call it the map, but also dynamic SBOM or bill of materials that is constantly updated based on the code itself. So it's up to date based on your code that is actually in production.
Tell me a little bit about why this is so important and how this really helps security.
There's a lot of different lenses you can put on that, or different approaches. So really, we've been banging our head against the wall I've been in this industry 17 years, specifically around SaaS or scanning the source code for vulnerabilities. And you know what? Those vulnerabilities still exist because everybody's trying to look at it through tunnel vision. I'm looking at just the source code vulnerabilities. I'm looking at just the open source package vulnerabilities or the APIs. They're not looking at how those things work together in an enterprise application. So there's always risk with multi-threaded or multi-variables to risk. You have a web application that has a critical CVE that also is touching PII data in a database or data store and also is talking to a third-party API. These are the things that are really hard to find because they're typically unique to an application. It's not like everyone's looking for a pattern with OWASP top 10 type vulnerabilities, whether that's the API security top 10 or the web application top 10. Everyone's looking for the same structure. We're going above and beyond that with ASP, so you truly understand your application above and beyond just one component or one kind of threat vector within the application.
Yeah, I was watching your podcast, and you did a bit about how you had sort of here's the front end of this, and this is like it's all running through this service, and then it's coming out, and this one piece where it comes out is attached to a database that has PII data in it, right? Socials and date of birth and things like that. And then it also had another attachment to like a third party organization. And you sort of mapped out how individually looking at them, they all looked okay. But it wasn't until you actually mapped the flow of data and connectivity through the whole architecture that you could really see where the problems were lying.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things with that is prioritization. We talked about all those AST scanning solutions, just reams of data, tons of vulnerabilities that are identified. Where do you start? Is every vulnerability, and all these platforms or products all have high, medium, low, critical, whatever the ranking is. But how do you kind of normalize that data to look at everything in context of the application? So what ASPM is bringing to the table is complete understanding, like this is the one I need to fix first. Real world example is we work with our customers and potential customers around the Log4j issue or the Spring Shell issue. And it wasn't just about, do you have it? Anybody can tell, with a quick kind of investigation that you have it. Okay, where do you have it? What is the priority to fix? This specific instance is also talking to PII data that's also talking to a third party. Let's focus on the ones that are talking to sensitive data, so we're not just looking at everything via the same kind of ranking system. These are the top 10, these are the second 10, these are the third 10, because it's all about the context of what that service is doing with the data of the application. Because without data, applications are pretty much useless.
I want to highlight, what you're saying here about prioritizing things. And I think this is something that's missed so often in so many companies, because security assets, security professionals are a limited resource, an extremely limited resource, and knowing where to place your priorities so that you mitigate the biggest threats first is incredibly crucial to making it all go. But it's amazing how many organizations you walk into and they're just kind of fixing things as they find them, and like what they want to fix, and that's not a great way to approach security, I can't imagine.
Well, it's a good thing they fix things because I see the same story where people are great at identification, but they're terrible at remediation. So
Right,
at least the
right.
people you're talking to are fixing things because that is the goal, is to fix potential security risk.
Yeah,
And
I
a lot of
suppose
times
that's good.
people get lost in the identification without clearly defining the remediation process. So it's an interesting conversation, and the prioritization really helps people work much more effectively because there's limited time in a day, and as you said, there's limited security professionals out there to leverage. So you need to find a way to work better in understanding complete context rather than trying to, look through the peephole in the door and try and figure out context and risk by just looking through the peephole in the door in the hotel room. Is it room service or is it a bad guy? I don't know. All I can see is this.
Environments have gotten so complex now. I mean, and especially during the pandemic, this accelerated massively. And there's this sort of shift of hybrid environments and moving to cloud and on-prem stuff and data moving all over the place and just a really expanded attack surface.
Yep.
And I think people rushed there and didn't really think everything through. And so therefore they don't really even have a remote concept of what it looks like.
Well, absolutely. And, we've seen real world examples. I personally have seen real world examples where there was an initiative to move an application from cloud to cloud, and they thought they had all the dependencies, set up. Everything was good. As soon as they flipped the button, there was missing dependencies. They had, multiple hours of downtime associated with the missing dependency, which is a simple fix. But if you don't know what to look for, you don't know what all the dependencies are or how they work, then you're kind of stuck. So, ASPM is a fantastic solution for that, to understand all the dependencies of an application and not push something out there before it's ready or before it's going to function correctly.
And you get a nice map of your whole architecture, which is a bonus too, that nobody has that either.
Yeah, and some people call that, what we're doing with the map, as kind of threat modeling in a way because it's an automated, but application security posture management is so much more. It draws that visual representation of your application. You can put many different lenses on it, from a data flow lens to a cloud service provider, from a region for a zone. You can really see what the blast radius, if something goes down, what does that affect? And gives you that based on the code, not based on, tribal knowledge or questionnaires or, an out-of-date CMDB, so on and so forth. Because everybody, you're releasing so fast, how can you keep up with that speed? The code is the source of truth, so leverage that to provide you with the most context possible for the application architecture.
Yeah, you don't have the intern coming in and it's like, your first job is to map the network. Go.
Exactly. Good luck. We'll talk to you in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple months.
Yep.
I kind of think of it as like sort of the APM of security, right? I mean, it's like you're looking at the source of truth, as you say, and sort of the end-to-end, transactional piece of it, so that you can kind of see how everything is working together.
It goes hand in hand with all the other technologies. People always ask, is Bionx ASPM platform a replacement for this technology or this technology? And I always say that it actually provides you with a better source of truth to make those solutions better. Because, if you're scanning source code with a SaaS vendor or open source packages with a software composition analysis, you're going to find a lot of things that are specific to those pieces, but we're going to give you the context of how those are used throughout the architecture. So it really helps you tune and make all the other tooling you use, whether, star AST is, kind of the hot term where you have all these AST technologies that have a different acronym or a different letter in front of it. We help those get better by providing you much better context to tune and create policy that is effective against your specific application's architecture.
When you step back from the application, it's a little easier to, probably analyze and predict, because you don't have that level of complexity as you do when you get down to the application layer, right? I mean, because, you're talking about people who are building their own things and could be doing all sorts of weird, screwy things that, have never even been seen before, right? How do you stay on top of all that? I mean, it just seems like a huge task.
It's basically like, following the trail of breadcrumbs, if you will, because it's looking at the components. It understands the components, understands, versions and frameworks and associative communications, whether it's, HTTP, HTTPS, all of that. That's all derived from the code. So you're not waiting to kind of find out what's happening with the application. You truly know what it was. I call it the 30,000 foot view, where you can't see the forest through the trees. Unless you can get above the trees and look down, you don't know what that forest looks like. And when you're in you're looking at specific, that's an oak or that's a pine, you're looking at these specific trees, you're not seeing how oh, I see how this all fits together. I see the path out of the forest. You need that higher level view of everything and working together rather than just, looking at it from a specific incident or a specific issue type approach.
On the other hand, too, you're also you're seeing that, Asian beetle that's, eating the one tree that's going to become an infestation and kill the forest at some point as well, too. So, you're really seeing a lot of depth there.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, when people see what we provide in terms of the depth and breadth of the architecture of an application, they're like, I've been looking for something like this forever. I have some Visio docs. I have some Lucid charts. I have some threat models that were done on a glass board. But this is real. I understand this, and this is updated every time. And you have a dynamic bill of materials that basically maps to the code that is being deployed, that's updated, so you don't have to go back to dated CMDB data or a little bit of information from a software composition analysis associated with a bill of materials for the open source packages. It is everything and is constantly updated. And that really gives people a complete understanding of the application and the risks, because a lot of times people don't know what they don't know or don't know what questions to ask of their application because they don't have full visibility and context.
You mentioned, the people that you're selling to, kind of appreciating this approach to doing it. Who do you sell to, and what kind of are the key people who are looking at this?
It's interesting, and I mean, being in the space, I haven't had this experience before where teams want to introduce you to other teams based on different use cases. So definitely application security people are very interested in what Bionic brings to the table. Enterprise architects are very interested in the architectural view. And then even site reliability engineers to understand, okay, what happens if there is an outage or an issue? How do I keep my application up? So those three groups are all very interested based on different use cases. And then you can kind of sprinkle in a little bit of the threat modeling teams that have been doing threat modeling, with the whiteboard and the architects and the methodologies associated with threat modeling. So all of those have kind of come to us and saw the platform and said, this is what I need because this gives me the context based on my business problem I'm looking to solve.
Yeah, I can really see this being a valuable tool on the SRE front. I don't know that a lot of companies have effectively gotten to the SRE phase of their existence yet.
You'll be surprised. There's a lot of them out there. I mean, I ask people all the time, do you have a site reliability team? And they're like, yes, or we just started one. So it is a hot position for organizations these days or to fill.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a really valuable way to approach it. I just think a lot of companies struggle with getting there. And then this is kind of like the SSRE.
Yes.
And I got to imagine developers really appreciate this because that's probably got to give them better perspective into some of the things that they're doing and how they're working as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, you talk about cloud native development where everybody works on their module of code and, you would just assume that everybody else is doing the right thing. And you can't really test it till it's in a snapped into the cloud environment or the cloud infrastructure to see how everything works together. And also it's a way for people to understand the application quicker. I mean, you hire a new software engineer and say, okay, here's our app. They're like, here's a bunch of documentations, poke around, figure out how it works. Or you can basically just look at Bionx ASPM map and really understand all the services and the interactions. So it does help with, understanding in a bunch of use cases, even for the development teams.
How is this deployed? And how does one, POC this and how challenging is that?
It's actually very simple. From an implementation standpoint, we're flexible to people's desires around where to house it. So we can have a SaaS-based model. We can have on-premise if people don't want data leaving or artifacts leaving their network, or even in a private cloud of the customer. It's really easy to operationalize in terms of a collection. So we integrate into the process of deploying software to wherever it's going to live in production. That can be through, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Kubernetes environments, Jenkins environments, and basically do a collection of the artifacts and then send those to the Bionic server, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud, for that reverse engineering and static analysis technique to actually produce it. So typically, it takes just a couple minutes to run the script, and then the analysis is all based on pretty much the complexity and the size of the application.
What do you see more of? Do you see more people doing the SaaS model, or do you see more people deploying it in an on-prem kind of capacity?
Really vertical centric. So the financials are the ones that are are more averse to sending things outside the network walls. So they want that on-prem.
Yeah.
But again, when you're talking about the SaaS model, then you're not responsible for the care and feeding. And a lot of organizations these days have a cloud-first initiative where if they can go cloud, they will go cloud. And it takes kind of the onus off of them for the care and feeding updates, whatever's happening. And plus, it's much cheaper where they don't have to actually pay for that, server or private cloud instance. So I'd say it's, more towards the SaaS, but there's always going to be on-premise requests based on kind of whatever vertical or risk kind of appetite you have for sending things outside your network walls.
And you mentioned fintech, and my experience with fintech is they are just so secretive about their processes.
Well, I don't know if they're secretive or they're just, money is what everybody wants. And, the information they have about financial transactions and PII data of people's bank accounts and things like that, they're just so highly regulated that they just, let's remove that risk. Even though that may be a very secure SaaS-based model, let's just remove that from the equation so we don't have to worry about it.
I've seen the fintech firms that, they feel everything is, the competitive edge, and they just, don't want to even talk about the type of RAM they're buying.
I totally get it. Yep. No, I've dealt with that many times.
I got to imagine you've seen it deployed in a lot of, interesting environments. Do you have any like cool use case stories that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch of use cases everywhere from compliance. An example would be, a company was moving into Europe and thought they were all set with GDPR requirements. And once Bionic looked at it, then all of a sudden they realized they were reaching back to a US data center for AWS. Had no idea. Luckily, they caught it before, the GDPR compliance caught it. So there's a use case. Some other use cases are, an application that had a critical CVE for remote code execution was identified by the security team, but it didn't do anything. It was basically like let's just use a silly example, a lunch ordering menu for the cafeteria. So they're like, we're not going to fix that remote. Nothing's happening. There's no data. There's no PII data. And all of a sudden, unbeknownst to the security team, there was a change made that they said, well, let's let them order lunch and pay for lunch with a credit card. And they did not know about this because they had already deemed it not an issue, even though it was a severe CVE for that. It wasn't doing anything. All of a sudden, you put credit card data on there or credit card processing capabilities. Now that CVE needs to be fixed. And we were able to find something like that. I mean, those are just two kind of cool use cases within kind of the activities we've had with the company since we came out of stealth.
Well, and I got to imagine from a compliance and reporting perspective too. I mean, one of the challenges that we see so much is that companies have to institute compensating controls for a lot of things because you can't always remediate every issue. But sometimes demonstrating how those compensating controls actually work can be a real challenge. You can say, well, you couldn't get to there because this is here. But I think it looks like you guys could actually map out how that compensating control works and show it.
If it's a network compensating control, we wouldn't see it, but we'd see anything associated with the cloud infrastructure. Not as deep as the cloud security posture management solution, but a lot of the information about what is in place, what the runtime environment is, and provide you with at least a very comprehensive set of data that you can then go back to look at those compensating controls. Because there's always the conversation in application security or security in general about false positive. What's your false positive rate? And that's not a real issue because we have a compensating control outside of the code. Okay, there's risk there. We don't know about that as whatever the AST tooling is. If you don't know about it, then you're going to have that subjective conversations around false positive, which I hate because there is security risk. You just need to add the context of the compensating control that is outside of the code or outside of the the running application as it sits doing whatever the functionality it needs to do.
It's definitely an interesting perspective, and I would imagine if I was building an infrastructure and managing an architecture, I would really appreciate all of that. So tell me a little bit about where do you see all this going? I mean, you guys are a relatively new company, right?
In a new space.
In a new space, and
yes.
You're kind of building a new market. I don't even think Gartner has an ASPM vertical yet, right? They will soon, I'm sure. But so, what obviously one of the things when we look at newer companies is that, there's a tremendous vision that's there. And that's really when you're buying some of these earlier stage products, that's what you're buying into is sort of the ultimate vision of this product and where it's going. I mean, you get the immediate benefit, but the real long-term benefit that it can provide is a huge selling point, right? So like where do you see this all going, and where do you see the market going?
ASPM as a technology is still being defined. People are calling themselves ASPM vendors or solutions, and they're doing something totally different. What I really feel is that it needs to be self-contained into doing everything. So providing the map, the data is from the product itself, and then all the correlation of risk and the correlation of architectural flaws or application architecture drift have to be contained, where a lot of the ASPM vendors are just a kind of a collection of all sorts of data points to see the posture, and using AI or machine learning to basically dedupe the SAS results from the SCA results from the API results. So I really think that the industry as a whole is going to love ASPM as a technology, because it does so much more than just collect stuff and present it. It's actually, judge, jury, and hangman into the architectural risk of your application. And me too, it's like, I always say, people that I show the product to, it's like, don't take my word for it, take other people. A lot of people are like, this is amazing. I've been looking for a lens like this forever. Yeah. How long has this technology been around? And I'm like, about 10 minutes. And they're like, oh, tell me more.
Are you guys hiring? Are you looking for people these days?
Oh, everybody's looking for good people. I mean, that a company is only as good as the talent of its employees in proper positions and proper, responsibilities within the company. But, I've been with Bionic 9-10 months, and I think we've doubled in terms of headcount.
Wow.
And one of the things that I always find, helpful for an organization is, if you're in a very technologically complex space, is to have great engineering talent. And we've been able to hire great engineering talent to help support the product and the futures that are coming out that, I can't tell you about just this moment, but there's a lot of capabilities in the product that are just going to blow people away in terms of integration with some of those technologies we already talked about in the early part of the podcast.
And I got to imagine the culture there is kind of fun, because, I mean, the fact that you run the tattoos, code, and, data flows podcast for Bionic, that's a little bit of an unusual animal there.
It is, and I mean, it's I'm like a rallying point at conferences, because it's like, don't look for the brown-haired guy with the suit coat, look for the bald guy with the beard and the tattoos. And I like to say that it's about finding great talent, and we're wanted to kind of really embrace that finding great talent. It doesn't matter what your personal preference is on looks or anything. Just find good talent that basically is very effective at solving complex problems and evangelizing a brand new space. So it is very fun, and this Glassboard, people have probably, if they've looked me up, see I do these Bionic Uncensored sessions.
Well, give us a little bit of the Glassboard, because this is pretty cool. If you haven't seen this podcast yet,
it's not hooked up to my software, so things will be. But I can draw directly on this, and if I had it hooked up to my software, it would flip the image. So if I write my name right now, it's backwards.
Which you do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, well, people ask me, like, how is he writing backwards? I mean, it's about having the way to communicate, and people love this because it's really easy to understand topics via a Glassboard. I'm a big whiteboard session guy before the pandemic, and I'm like, we got to get creative to have these same type of conversations. And this really has helped with kind of that interactive whiteboarding conversational presentation, instead of just sitting through another PowerPoint.
One whiteboard conversation is worth 1,000 PowerPoints.
And it's always a good one if people take pictures of the board. That's how I always rate the session. If someone's taking a picture of the board, they like something on there. So if they don't take a picture, I feel like we've missed our mark.
Well, I encourage everybody to go and check that podcast out. And in fact, on one of the podcast episodes that I watched, you were talking about the very issue of people being a little non-traditional in the security space. And like. It's time businesses are going to have to cope with that and welcome that with open arms if they want to get good talent.
Well, I do have the social question that I ask everybody on the podcast, and I think I've 17 or 18 episodes released. And the tattoos, like, do you have any tattoos? What's your take on people expressing themselves? Not one person said, I don't want it. The only one they said was like, if you have a giant spider on your face, that may be a little career limiting. But even at that, they probably said if they were a good fit for the job, it wouldn't deter them from hiring that person.
Yeah, Post Malone's sort of normalizing the face tats.
It's fun though. It's all in good fun. So especially in security and in high tech startups, having fun and working hard, but working with people you like is really a benefit to the long hours and the kind of processes that may not be as well defined as they should be. They're going to evolve just like products and spaces evolve.
Hiring good people who are trustworthy and talented, and kind of leaving them alone as much as possible to do what they want, or do what they do, I think is always a good way to do it.
Well, when you talk about the history lessons, I'll go back to when I first got into SAST, scanning the source code with Fortify back in, I think it was 2005, 2006. And this is, before SAST was, a household acronym, if you will. And you'd present to people like, you need to scan the source code to find vulnerabilities. And they kind of look at you sideways. You want me to do what? I have a firewall. I have an IPS. I have an IDS. Everything is secure on the network. I said, no, the code. And they're like, wow, I don't understand how to do this. Now, we're talking 17 years later, everybody knows what it is. And we're finding new and interesting ways to even find more information or more risk that you may not have identified without the proper solutions in place.
It's amazing how fast things change, and how this is an industry where you really, really have to stay on top of everything and just constantly learning.
Well, that's what I say is, when you call yourself an expert is the day you fall behind the curve.
Yeah, you can be an expert for about a day.
About a second, yeah. Things change so quick.
There's a quote that I've heard a lot of, like sales engineers, talk about. It's like, I don't have to know everything, but I do have to be one page ahead of you in the manual.
I haven't heard that, but I like that. I may use that.
It's sort of like, I don't need to outrun the bear, but I just need to outrun you.
Yeah, I just got to be faster than you.
Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate your perspective. I like your podcast. Again, I'll put a link to that, for folks to check out. And it's been a real fun conversation. Really appreciate you coming on, and good luck with everything you guys are doing.
Oh, thank you very much. And, thanks for inviting me on. It was a, great conversation. I really just enjoy talking to people about technology and different ways to approach it. And I think we all become educated by our peers more so than anything else.
Yeah, well, our motto is cool people doing cool stuff. And you guys fall into that category. So thanks for watching. Love to hear from you in the comments. And if you enjoyed what you saw, please give us a like and think about subscribing. That subscription really helps the channel a lot. And I will see you in the next video.